Hello, welcome to another Modest Musings. My name is Fear Dragon, and today's topic is going to be about tournament formats, why I think a lot of them have gotten a bit stale, and some kind of weird alternatives that are a bit of blast from the past, honestly, that could really spice things up. So let's start with what exactly are current modern day formats for tournaments, because quite frankly, it's pretty standard at this point. For group stages, it is the typical GSL group. And it's actually, for if you go way, way back, the original seasons of the GSL didn't have GSL groups. Instead, they were the very kind of normal round robin groups that you used to have. So everybody would play everybody. And what that meant, and this was actually a cause of a lot of, problems back in the day, most famously with Naniwa versus Nest, I believe, where you'd have matches that were being played that had no impact on who would make it out and who wouldn't make it out of their group. Or even on seeding sometimes. There'd just be two players that were already confirmed knocked out of the group, but they'd still have to play against each other. And that was the famous situation where Naniwa probe rushed Nest and caused a huge uproar about things and how he threw the game, even though it didn't have any actual value for that match being played. So there's a kind of weirdness that ended up happening with Round Robin, which I'll come back to. Round Robin is a part of one of the formats that I'm sort of interested in. And I'm going to talk about later as a potential interesting format with some twists. But that part aside, we move from that format to the current GSL format where you have two sets of players play in a group of four, then the winners play, then the losers play, and then you have the loser of the winners match play the winner of the losers match. Might have gotten my phrases mixed up there, but most people are familiar, especially if you're watching this vlog. You probably know kind of the system that I'm talking about. So what is the problem with that system? Besides just being very, very stale system that we just see everywhere all the time. Every single tournament that has a group is played with the GSL format. And one of the big problems and kind of criticisms that's been levied at this format for a long time, but maybe doesn't actually get talked about that much anymore, is that it's possible to get knocked out of the group by one person. So the system in which this would happen is, let's say that you have player A and player B, right? Player A plays player B in the very first match. Cool. Player A beats player B. Boom. Player A is in the winner's match. Player B is in the loser's match. So player A, not quite as strong as whoever else is in the winner's match, gets knocked down to the decider match, that ace match. Player B overcomes whoever was playing the other loser's match and goes into the decider match as well. So now it's player A versus player B again. The only person that player B has lost to so far is player A. But player A, if he wins there, is going to completely knock out player B. So there's this weirdness where one player can completely knock someone out. And if it is just a system, if StarCraft were a weird sort of system where it was just about one set of factors where, you know, one person's just skill level, if you represented skill level by a number, and whatever, MMR, let's say, or something similar to that, super duper accurate MMR that's never wrong, then yeah, that kind of system would be okay, because theoretically you could create a ranking for those four players where person who advanced out in first is better than everybody else. Player A was second best, player B was third best, and person who got knocked out in last was fourth best. But StarCraft is a game with more, like, most importantly, I would say, different matchups. So just because player A managed or happened to lose to the player who made it out in first doesn't necessarily mean that player B would have lost versus that person who made it out in first, because maybe the matchups are a little bit different. Maybe the maps kind of work out that way. So there's all kinds of weirdness that ends up coming up with the GSL groups, besides just being a very, very repetitive format. That's honestly just done because it's the standard these days and saves time. So that is one of the problems. The other problem is single elimination and double elimination brackets. So to really quickly go over the pros and cons for single versus double elimination and all that kind of stuff, the biggest thing is with single elimination, players are always a little bit afraid or antsy that, oh, if there's a lot on the line, a single elimination bracket can be brutal. One bad matchup, a little bit of bad seeding, and you're out of there. So there's no safety net, which can be more exciting for viewers, but causes a lot of other problems. You have, again, like a little bit of bad seeding and maybe two, not even necessarily the best players in the bracket, but two pretty good players in the bracket meet up against each other. And you just wonder, oh, well, why the hell did they meet up? Maybe the seeding wasn't entirely accurate, as of course, a lot of the seeding these days done by WCS points, which isn't always going to be reflecting who is currently strong at that given moment. It reflects who has been strong over the course of the year, not necessarily at any given moment, especially given shifting metas, etc. So that's kind of single elimination bracket. Double elimination bracket has a little bit more of that safety net, but a lot of players do not like playing double elimination brackets. Why? Because when they lose in the winner's match, they don't, it sounds weird to say, but a lot of them don't want to play in a loser's match. They already feel tilted. They feel like it's, obviously it takes up a lot more time, so there's a lot more waiting, especially if you make it in like 2-3 rounds, then you get knocked to the loser's bracket. Well, now you might be waiting for like 2-3 hours, and in an online setting, that's already frustrating. In an offline setting, that can be really, really painstaking, just waiting for hours and hours for your match, never really sure exactly when it's going to come. So that's one of the problems. Again, the other problem is that it just takes a long time to run a double elimination bracket. It takes an absurd amount of time. So that's kind of the second major problem. And again, the third problem is for both of these brackets is that they're really just overdone now. We see them so insanely often. So what are some kind of interesting mix-ins that we could be throwing in to, I guess, change things up a little bit? One of my favorite kind of mix-ups for events that I saw was done by Kings of the North. Kings of the North was a local, sorry, not local. It was a LAN event that happened in Toronto. It was 8 players that were invited. And one thing that they did that was really cool, and I really, really liked this, was that they did the entire first day were best of ones for round robin. Now, think about what exactly that means. Best of ones for round robin. That means that you play every single person else in the tournament in a best of one. So it's a high stakes game. It's exciting to watch. One of the other problems with round robin is that when you have too many games kind of going on, and they're all like best of threes and everything, it can feel like there's not a lot on the line. With best of ones, there's always going to be something. It always feels very intense. You can get lucky and cheese out your opponent, but that person's not knocked out. The players don't have that kind of lack of safety net. And that's one thing I really, really liked about it. The other thing is the games that we saw in all of those best of ones were incredibly exciting. You would see the crazy strategies because you had to play on one map. Now, there is, of course, a little bit of weakness there. If you have a map pool that doesn't feel super balanced, for example, I think a lot of people these days have been complaining, especially in Protoss versus Zerg. I know even Pig did a daily on this, that Protoss is really struggling on the current maps versus Zerg. So in this current map pool, if you have a best of one, you veto down to one map, more often than not, Protosses are not going to like how that plays out because they at least have a chance, or they feel like they have more of a chance when they get to play on Abyssal Reef and Proxima Station, like at least get some of those other maps that they feel more comfortable on. But in this map pool, maybe a little bit difficult. So there is a little bit of a problem with that. But overall, you'd use that to determine seeding. Now, here's where I add in the second part. Kings of the North went from there into a normal single elimination bracket. But I'm actually going to bring back something super old school that I think was incredibly exciting and incredibly awesome. You take that sort of seeding format where you have the best of ones and you determine the seeding and you take it into something like this. This is MLG Anaheim or not MLG Anaheim. This is just the MLG Pro Circuit format. This was what was known as the championship bracket for MLG. Now, the way that this was composed, you can see over here, you have things like these players in these kind of rows early on. You can see, like, for example, Select or Sheth, or all these people that ended up losing the first round. Axlav, Bjol, that's a throwback. So all these people came in from the open bracket, all right, or the people in this first round. So you have a couple people who can come in if you want to have an open brackets format. Not, you don't necessarily have to, but if you want to, you can have those people play in this first round match. Then the second round match, as you have these first 8 players playing against each other, a second round match will be the people who were maybe bottom seed in that kind of best of one if you had invites. Or you know what? Maybe we just kind of start with this first round over here. And either way, it's all the bottom seed players playing against each other. And maybe you had groups for best of ones. If you have 32 players, you have 8 players all playing versus each other, and you kind of determine seeding that way. All the 4 bottom players, or bottom X number of players, end up playing against each other. You have a 64 player bracket. And you create this. And you notice the way that this is formatted is effectively, this is you can see over here, a monster almost playing like a king of the hill. And this is exciting for viewers because it's a high stakes system. It is single elimination, but single elimination only because the players are lower seeds. And there's still a lot of rewards for getting a higher seed. If you get a high seed, you start off much further along the bracket. You can see over here, for example, Polt started all the way 5 rounds in. So he gets rewarded for doing well in those best of ones. And if you're really, really good, you'll notice down over here, oh, well, Puma and Don Regu and Marine King and Stefano, they just start off in what's effectively a winner's bracket. It is a double elimination bracket. But only the top 4 players, so maybe it's the number 1 player from each group, maybe it's the top 2 players from each group or something like that. Those players get a second life effectively. That's their reward for doing incredibly well. So that gives a lot of meaning to that round robin play, while still giving meaning to people who just come a little bit short. If you come out third or second in your group, you still make it in. Even if you don't get that second life, which is a very coveted spot for getting first in your group, you still get the kind of advantage of starting in the one or very, very close to the last round or the highest possible round. So there's a lot of this kind of really coolness that comes out of this championship bracket. It's very exciting. King of the Hill, as we've seen through Shoutcraft Clan Wars, not always necessarily the quote-unquote fairest format, although I think the seeding from the day one of the round robin stuff is kind of helpful for making that a little bit more fair. But it's a very exciting format to watch, and I think that it can be a lot of fun for players as well. The biggest thing also is that you get these stories that are able to be built up. If a player makes a run through a bracket, it's like, okay, cool. Everybody made a run through the bracket. If a player makes it to the semifinals, yeah, all 3 of the other players also just ran their way and beat a bunch of other players to make it to the semifinals. The story only really comes if they beat a bunch of really, really good players or something. What's really cool about this format is there's a very clear distinction of, wow, did you notice how Monster didn't just make his way to the, all the way through this kind of side of the championship bracket just by beating the same number of people as, say, for example, Polt. He beat Chef and JYP and Dream and Ryung and MC and Alicia, and he just kept going and going. That's how you create this really interesting story through the format. You allow this capability of something to be told there. And there's also that kind of cool thing that can happen where maybe, for example, let's take, for example, Lucky. Even if Lucky doesn't make it all the way through, there's still an interesting story to be told about how he maybe didn't beat everybody, but he got to go for 3 players and beat 3 really good players in a row. And even if his bracket luck ends over there, it's still something that people take notice of, and there's a story to be told there. There's something interesting that a player gets to walk away with feeling good about themselves. And that's a really cool thing that I feel like the current formats are really missing right now. Now, I want to make this clear. I'm not supporting the idea that every tournament should be best of one round robin leading into an MLG championship bracket. Not at all what I'm saying. But I do think we could find actually a surprising amount of value if more things were like that. If we just had more of a mix-up from this nauseating just single elimination and double elimination brackets that are preceded by GSL group stages and maybe 3 GSL group stages as we have with DreamHack. It just gets so boring. You can see that while those kinds of formats have a lot of value, if you overplay them and overdo them, I think that they lose a lot of their value. It becomes sort of too common. And I'd love to see more different formats. Cheesadelphia is mixed in with just straight up, even just round robins early on instead of group stages, which can definitely be interesting. I would love to even see people get really crazy. Red Bull used to have all kinds of funky experimentation stuff with, for example, a live system. Now, where people would have 3 lives and they'd challenge other players and stuff. Now, I'm not saying that that necessarily is the best format to determine, a WCS champion or something. Maybe these aren't just for the WCS Championship Premier League tournaments, but I think we could be a little bit more creative. And I think that if you guys are interested, try thinking of some cool tournament formats for yourself. Maybe a tournament organizer, maybe I will steal them from you. Promise if I steal it from you, I will credit you, whoever you are. But yeah, let me know if you guys have any kind of cool tournament formats. Maybe you know some tournament formats from other games. And yeah, be sure to keep an eye out for Challenge Wars, because Challenge Wars, one of the tournaments that I run, definitely going to have some cool formats, I promise. I have a lot of stuff planned with that. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this week's stuff. Updates are that Saturday at 4 in the morning for me. So 4 in the morning Pacific. I think it's like 1 p.m. Central Eastern Standard Time or something. Whatever. European time. Around 1 p.m. DreamHack is going to be happening. I will be commentating that on my channel, twitch.tv/FearDragon64, with the one and only Tenshi. Man, who I, maybe for the second time, but realistically, I'm going to treat it as like the first time I got to commentate Neve versus Masa for Kings of the North show match with him very recently. And that was super duper fun. So we're going to bring it back, commentate DreamHack for like 8 to 12 hours. It's going to be awesome. And yeah, hopefully you guys decide to tune in for that. And have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day / week. And keep StarCrafting.